In today's video, I'm going to be looking at the world of KDP cover design. You know, that secret salesman that either makes or breaks the success of your books. I'm going to take you through some tips, 10 of them in fact, that I have created to kind of give you an idea of how you might be able to have some success in designing covers. We're also going to take a look at some covers that are on Amazon KDP at the moment and do a little bit of a kind critique. And I'm going to have a little try at the end to have a crack of redesigning a cover that I found online. If this is something that might interest you, make sure that you stick around and watch the video. But for now, let's head across to the computer so we can get started. So let's first make a start with my top 10 hints and tips for creating book covers. So your book cover is going to be one of the most important things that you need to consider, outside of your quality content, of course. It is the first thing that any book customer is going to see, and it will determine if they click to see more and find out a bit more about your book, or whether they're going to pick it up if it's a physical product to browse through. And either way, if they either click and see what they like, or they browse through and see what they like after looking at your cover, that's going to equal some success for you. So it needs to grab your viewer's attention, and it needs to look as professional as possible. So what do we need to do to make sure that happens? The first tip is to know your audience. So tailoring your cover to resonate with your target reader is really important. If your book is about fitness, it should be themed that way, and likewise for a children's activity book. So this may feature things like cute clip art characters and fun colours. The second tip is that quality does matter. So high quality does matter. Use clear, high resolution photos or illustrations, because those blurry and pixelated and poorly illustrated images, they don't look good, and they're going to impact on how your book is perceived. So using images with a minimum resolution of 300 dpi or dots per inch may ensure some crisp and clear printing in both digital and physical formats. If you're looking at sourcing stock photos, make sure you choose really high quality options from reputable websites, and avoid any blurry or generic or overly used images. Things like JPEGs that have been saved over and over can really pixelate and get blurry. For a really unique touch, and if you do have the money, you might consider commissioning some custom illustrations, and whoever is doing those illustrations obviously will also be able to produce those in very high quality. Tip number 3 is simplicity, and that is not over cluttering your cover. So keeping it clean with the title easy to read at a glance. If you're using visuals, then let them do most of the talking for you. I guess the idea here is balance. So arranging any elements on your cover in a way that feels balanced and harmonious. So you can consider things like the rule of thirds for an aesthetically pleasing composition, and you'll be able to find information on rule of thirds online. The other thing that I see people use a lot of, which is a bit like the rule of thirds really, but is grids, and all different types of grids that you can overlay onto a design and use that to help with the setting out of your elements. The second thing there, tip number 4, is colour theory. So doing yourself a huge favour and learn about colour theory. So you can research online, or you might even want to take a Skillshare course if you're able to. And this is really going to leverage your understanding of colour theory so that it can be applied to your cover. Choosing colours that reflect your book's theme and evoke the right emotions are really incredibly important. So for example, reds and oranges might exude energy and excitement, which could be really great for fitness planners or activity books. Blues and greens, they often promote calmness and peace, and they can be ideal for self-care journals or sleep trackers, for example. Tip number 5 is having a clear title and a subtitle. So these titles and subtitles on your book covers should be really the stars of the show, but like any performance, our stars need to know their place and when and where they should perform. In both cases, you need to be using a clear, bold font that's easy to read, because it will need to be read even in a little thumbnail image, as this is going to be the first to be seen as well. So placement here could be things like putting it prominently on the cover, maybe in the top half, with the subtitle being placed below the title or integrated within your main image. The author name can also be placed at the bottom of the cover. Color contrast also plays a part here, with the clear title and subtitle, because you need to make sure there's enough contrast between text and background color so that the text is easily readable. So considering things like using a light colored text on a dark background or vice versa could be really important here. Tip number 6 is text hierarchy, which guides the viewer's eye. So when you look at a cover, your eye is drawn to certain parts of that cover, and that depends on your text size and also your placement, which I've mentioned just before. The title should really have the largest font, followed by a slightly smaller subtitle. And if you're placing an author name, keep it small but readable. Number 7 is considering your fonts and the ways in which they may complement your book's theme and tone. But remember, don't go overboard with fancy fonts. So if you are visiting a site like Creative Fabrica, you can have, where they have thousands and thousands of fonts, you're going to get overwhelmed. And whilst they may look really pretty and fancy, they could detract from being able to be clearly seen and really hard to read. There are some fonts that are really good for different purposes. For instance, a sans serif for modern. For example, sans serif fonts, perhaps like Arial or Helvetica, are clean and modern, and they might be good for fitness planners or productivity journals or recipes. You can also look for font combinations if you wish for a more dynamic look, so maybe a combination of 2 different fonts. But a good rule of thumb is to keep them within the same sort of family, for example, so like a sans serif font being paired with a bold and then maybe even the more delicate one for the subtitle. So number 8 is negative space. An empty space can have power within a design when it's used strategically. So it can create some balance overall on your cover. For example, a large area of empty space surrounding your title can make it the focal point, while negative space is important. It's really important to avoid using too much. An overly empty cover can appear really sparse and uninteresting. So again, looking for the balance there. So tip number 9 I've called mock-up magic, and this is where you can preview your design on a number of different mock-ups. So a mock-up is like a blank book sat on a desk, and then you can superimpose your cover on top of it, for example. There are a few on Canva that you can use. You just need to go into Elements and look for mock-ups. And then you can put a copy of the picture of the front cover of your book on this and see how it might look as a book or as a thumbnail, and edit it if needed. You can also test it out on family and friends and get some feedback from them. These mock-ups can really show how your cover will look on a physical book, in your thumbnail image, on KDP, or even on a phone screen. So it's well worth doing. And number 10 is, don't be worried about having a go at designing your own cover, because it's a really, really great way to develop some skills. If it really isn't your forte and you're really not interested in creating your own covers, then you can look at outsourcing that through freelancers, such as those that you'll find on somewhere like Fiverr. You can have a cover designed for a reasonable fee. They do range in price, but the tip here is to find someone who designs covers that has good reviews and a good track record. So you might look for portfolios on sites such as this that have freelancers on them that showcase KDP covers that are within your genre and budget. And it's important to clearly communicate your vision and target audience to that designer and provide them details with your book's content and any other specific design preferences that you might have in terms of your book. So they are my top 10 tips. So let's have a look now at some examples. Before we do this though, just remember that this is a critique with good intentions and we're not throwing mud at the creator of these covers. We all have to remember we start somewhere, and that kindness is the key. So I'm going to talk to them objectively using the 10, tips that I have in this video. So this is our first cover for today. Now for this one, if I think about knowing your audience, I think the audience is for young women. It's high quality, questionable. It's simplistic, it is in that. And the colour theory, I don't mind the colours. I think the pinks, the oranges and the blacks aren't too bad. There's a clear title, but there's no subtitle. And the title's kind of running off to the left. So I don't know, I think the heart is the thing that really draws my eye, followed by the fire and the picture, but the title just really doesn't stand out, and it doesn't give me an indication of what this book is about, apart from finding your passion of what. So more information would have been good with a subtitle. The font is a bit difficult to read as a thumbnail. There's a little bit of negative space there. And I think this could have benefited with some mock-up magic and some feedback. In our next example, I think that this author really knows her audience. So she's really directing this at people who really wanted to explore their notion of self. The cover itself is really well balanced and it's of high quality. It's really quite simple, but there's a really nice color theory there in that it's really soft and calming. I can see the title very, very clearly, and I like the use of the two fonts. And there's also a bit of a subtitle there that's been cleverly incorporated onto that card to give you a little bit more detail around what this book is about. So this book would have you reaching to find out a little bit more. With this book, we have two colors that are working quite well with each other, but what I find is really difficult is that it's not centered, that the title and the subtitle are competing with one another in terms of the elements, and the feet, it just doesn't, it's not cohesive in the way that it's put together. And there is an element there of just the scratchiness, sort of abstract that's sort of been plonked on, which could have had the transparency toned down a little bit, because when I look at this, all I can see is an off-centered title and this huge big white speckled mess. If the title was perhaps censored and we took the white abstract away and reduced the amount of feet, we could use that negative space to really highlight the title but have some feet sort of going across as a bit of an interesting element. I think this might be turning into a bit of what not to do, but anyway. The self-care journal, really simple font. The font could have changed up a little bit, and maybe you could have had self-care all on the one line and brought it in together. The image, it looks like something that's just been taken from Pixabay and slapped onto the cover. Perhaps that could have been a white cover with lots of pretty butterflies sort of flying around it. And there is an author name there, which is sort of off to the side, sort of hidden in amongst the butterfly, which needed to be centered as well. Now, I think this one's got some good bones. I really like the colors in it. I think that there's way too much text on the front cover, and I do think that the flowers and the gumboot make it look a little bit unprofessional, but I think I could work with this one because this one wasn't selling, and I think it has got the potential to do something really, really cute here. So I want to take this and see whether or not I can juice up what this one looks like. Right, so I'm in Canva. Let's have a little look. I don't mind the colours of this one. I think the person's done some really good stuff. So let's have a little look and see. Now I have saved a bit of time here by speeding up the video. So I was having a bit of a play because I wanted to recreate the waves. And I did end up finding a bit of clip art that I thought would suit that quite well. And one that I could actually change each component of the colours to kind of match in what was already existing on the screen. So I was just sort of looking at placement, thinking about how I could create the title to really stand out and take away some of that text, keeping the subtitle really quite small down the bottom, but featuring the waves, which I thought were really well done, and incorporating some of the flowers, but maturing them up a little bit, I guess, so that they were able to still be on the cover, but not in such a childlike, whimsical way. I think one of the hardest things to kind of get right is the font. I'm not so bad on the visuals when I'm sort of trying to design my own colours, but fonts can be really tricky in finding a way to make them really stand out, but also have some design element in them as well. You can see here I'm just sort of mucking around with different placements of the flowers there. And I didn't want to overdo it with the flowers. I also changed the outline setting of those flowers to make them sort of blend in with the back cover a little bit more to make it a bit more cohesive. Let me just download that and we'll do a comparison, and you guys can let me know at home what you think, whether I've totally stuffed it. I think, oops, I just downloaded it, but I want to change this a little bit too. I might actually, there we go. Let's have a look at them side by side. So I've got this one here. Or we've got this one here. My reasoning for changing around is I thought the cover was a bit too wordy. I thought this was a bit too cutesy, and this can go on the back cover. You could keep this sort of going and flowing onto, so this, I'd actually, if I had the whole cover there, I would flip this and I would put this on the back somewhere. I also separated the heading. Now it's interesting because when you create a cover for KDP, you have to have the title and usually the subtitle on the cover. So you got to be really careful with that. So I couldn't change that. It had to have this, and I just put that as a bit of the subtitle, so it still would meet this criteria. Do you think the gym boot or not? So that's probably the easiest one. So yes to the gym boot, no, or what else would you have added? What would you have done to improve this particular cover, or to change? Shouldn't say to improve. What would you have done to change this cover if you were given the same opportunity? So keep in mind here that I'm not a graphic artist. I've created a lot of artwork and pages and designs over the years, but I'm not formally trained in anything, so who am I to say? And this is about taking something that I can see not selling and just thinking, what can I do? If it was my book and it wasn't selling, what would I have done to change it? Thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope that you are coming away from this video with some newfound knowledge or ideas that you're going to now take to your KDP self-publishing business. If you enjoyed seeing me redesign the cover and you'd like to see more of that, let me know in the comments. Now go out there and create some books, and I will see you in the next video.